Have you ever stopped to think about what happens when someone who should offer you love, support, or friendship starts seeing you only as a reflection? Not as who you really are, but as a mirror that exists solely to reinforce their own greatness. That's what it feels like to live with a narcissistic personality. And let's be clear, we're not talking about everyday vanity or the occasional selfishness that all of us display from time to time. Pathological narcissism is something much deeper, far more complex and destructive. It's a psychological way of functioning that twists human relationships, whether family, romantic, professional, or friendships. The dynamic is always marked by imbalance. The narcissist builds a grandiose image of themselves to protect an extremely fragile inner identity. And everyone around them ends up being judged by a single measure: how much they can feed and reinforce that image. It's as if you stop being a whole person and become just a piece in a game, a tool, an emotional resource. If you've lived with someone like this, you've probably noticed a cycle in their relationships. The intensity may vary, but the pattern almost always repeats. It begins with idealization. That's the moment when the narcissist places you on a pedestal. Suddenly, you're the perfect partner, the soulmate found in just a few weeks. Or you're the special child, the one praised above all siblings. Maybe you're the unique and true friend, trusted in a way that feels absolute. The intensity is intoxicating. You feel seen, valued, chosen. It's almost impossible not to believe in the authenticity of that enchantment. But gradually, this phase gives way to devaluation. The very same gaze that once admired you now begins to wound you. The criticism starts subtly: a comment, a comparison, a sideways glance. Slowly, it becomes more direct. A narcissistic sibling might constantly remind you of past failures. A colleague who once applauded your ideas may now present them as if they were their own. A romantic partner who once adored your quirks now uses them as ammunition to prove you were never good enough. And in this process, your self-esteem begins to crumble. You find yourself working harder and harder to win back the approval that once seemed freely given. Then, inevitably, comes the discard. That's when the narcissist decides you no longer serve their purpose. In friendships, it might show up as sudden disappearances, ignored messages, while they flaunt a new best friend on social media. At work, you may be sidelined from projects, your voice erased, your name forgotten in important meetings. The cruelest part is that the discard rarely comes with clarity or closure. You're left confused, disoriented, questioning what you did wrong, often believing the flaw is in you, when in reality, it's their pattern. To maintain this cycle, narcissists use a sophisticated arsenal of manipulation. One of the most common is reality distortion. That's when your perception is constantly invalidated. A father denies traumatic childhood events, insisting you're making things up. A partner claims you misremember conversations. At work, a narcissistic colleague rewrites the story of a project, taking credit for successes and blaming you for failures. Over time, you begin to doubt your own memory, your own sanity. Another weapon is triangulation. It works by bringing other people into the dynamic, creating comparisons and insecurities. A narcissistic boss, for example, pits employees against each other. A friend constantly brings up others, implying you're easily replaceable. In families, it looks like a parent who distributes attention strategically, keeping everyone in a permanent state of competition. The effect is always the same: control through division. And of course, we can't forget the famous love bombing. At the start, it appears as an avalanche of love, affection, and generosity. But it also resurfaces whenever the narcissist needs something. A distant relative suddenly shows up when they need a favor. A coworker showers you with praise so you'll take on part of their workload. Or a sibling suddenly becomes attentive when they need support in a family dispute. These gestures seem warm, but they're rarely genuine. They work like strategic investments, and later, the emotional debt will be collected. Among all strategies, perhaps one of the most painful is the silent treatment. That's when the narcissist simply erases you, denies your presence, pretends you don't exist. At home, it may mean being ignored in family gatherings. At work, being excluded from important communications. In relationships, it can turn into days or even weeks of absolute silence after a simple disagreement. It's an invisible kind of violence, but deeply cruel. Identifying a narcissistic personality isn't simple, but there are patterns that repeat. Conversations always circle back to the narcissist's achievements. There's an inability to genuinely celebrate other people's successes. Explosive reactions arise from even the smallest criticism. There's an expectation of special treatment without any reciprocity. They exaggerate their own accomplishments while minimizing everyone else's. Their compliments feel hollow, their generosity calculated. And perhaps the most telling sign, the extreme difficulty in admitting mistakes or offering a sincere apology. So the question arises, how do you deal with this? The first step is knowledge. Understanding that what you're experiencing is not a personal failure, but a pathological pattern. That helps depersonalize the abuse. What feels directed only at you is actually something the narcissist repeats with anyone who comes close. The second step is setting clear boundaries. This means recognizing what you're no longer willing to accept, whether disrespect, invasions of privacy, or unrealistic demands, and communicating that firmly. Yes, those boundaries will be tested again and again. Consistency requires courage, but it might mean hanging up the phone when the conversation turns abusive. It might mean walking away from an environment where respect has been broken, or simply refusing to engage in circular arguments that go nowhere. A very useful technique is what's called the gray rock method. That's when you become emotionally neutral with the narcissist. Your answers are short, your tone is flat, you avoid sharing personal details. You stop being a source of drama, emotion, or fuel. It's like turning into a plain rock on the ground, invisible, uninteresting. Another essential step is lowering expectations. This may be the hardest of all. It means fully accepting that you will never receive genuine validation, recognition, or love from this person. There's no point in convincing, changing, or making the narcissist see your perspective. Real change only happens if they seek professional help. And that's rare, because admitting vulnerability clashes with the grandiose self-image that sustains the disorder. That's why self-care is indispensable. Prolonged exposure to a narcissist can cause anxiety, depression, chronic insecurity. Taking care of yourself isn't luxury, it's survival. That can mean reviving forgotten hobbies, investing in healthy bonds, practicing mindfulness, seeking therapy, or simply setting aside quiet moments to reconnect with yourself. Part of healing involves reframing the relationship, recognizing that it wasn't love or genuine friendship, but a setup where you were used as a resource. Acknowledging that the disconnection you felt was real. The narcissist was never truly connected to you, only to the role you played in their life. And the grief that follows is not for the loss of an authentic relationship, but for the loss of the illusion of what you thought it was. True freedom begins when you realize you are not responsible for carrying the fragile grandiosity of someone else. You don't have to feed a void that can never be filled. Your emotional energy is far too valuable to waste on a battle with no end. Every boundary you enforce, every step you take toward peace, every healthy relationship you build, all of it is an act of resistance. Living with a narcissist, whether a parent, a partner, a sibling, or a colleague, is always a huge challenge. But it can also become an opportunity to rediscover your own worth. 2. Strengthen your intuition. To relearn how to trust people who show genuine empathy and consistent reciprocity. In the end, healing doesn't come from understanding the narcissist. Healing comes from understanding that you deserve so much more. You deserve relationships where your voice is heard, where your value is recognized, where your humanity is celebrated, not used.